Before we begin today's episode with Dr. Daigle, I want to review a little bit of these products. These products will come in handy as you listen to this episode as we talk about these things. Daylight Computer Companies for Kids. This is the product of the future for kids, and it's already here. This is the benefit of this. There's absolutely no blue light. This computer right here for kids it's unbelievable. The work that Daylight Computer Company is doing for the benefits of humanity. Their product is like no other. Blue light free. It is so fantastic if you need computer time at night. The benefits of the Daylight Computer Companies is outdoors, the screen just lights up. It uses the light from the environment. You don't need the backlight. And they come equipped, ready for learning, reading, schoolwork. You can use these with Google Classroom, IXL, Google Chrome. No more of the alternative computer and those harms. No more of it. The future of technology is here. You can use Autism at checkout for $50 off Daylight Kids. The second one is Daylight DC1. Their computer for adults or teenagers. You can see this as well. I'll show you mine. And it is so fantastic for outdoors and at night. Even during the day, you're not getting that blue light. And this is very beneficial. This isolated blue light is underrated with what is happening to our biology and health. You can use the code AUTISM for $50 off Daylight Computer Company's DC1 as well. They have special patents here that are just so fantastic. You can zoom in, you can read, you can listen to videos. The last product is Chroma Light Devices. Lights designed for humans. If you watch the episode with Dr. Daigle or any of the other previous episodes, we often talk about light and how humans are designed around light. You can go to Chroma's website and click any of their products and just get a good understanding of what it is, what it's used for, how to use it even. How do I use the Iron Forge Mini? This is a new product of theirs. The Iron Forge is a very popular product, and they just developed a Mini. You can see these links right here just to navigate their website. It's fantastic so that it can help you kind of understand your goals here. I really want to highlight the Trinity, though, as we're talking about Chroma Light Devices. The Trinity is like no other. It would be unreal if health insurance companies would pay for this, because I'm telling you, if they would spend the $3,000 for this light, human health would improve vastly. There would be so much cost savings if everybody had access to a Chroma Trinity. This is a new product of theirs, and it encompasses essentially the whole light wavelength, the whole spectrum of light. This is the ultimate light device. You will probably not find anything close to this. You can use Autism at Chroma for 10% off. It's great news. I like the your instructional videos or your message is very fantastic. It's one of the things that draws me to you. It's like it's a little non-traditional, versus the status quo or the paradigm, what the paradigm says we should do for autism.
Yeah, I read the book, Dan, right? So I'll tell you this, man, I got a personal background in all of this. So, and I'm an ex-college athlete. I got thick skin. I know that everyone typically follows the leader and people aren't getting answers that they're looking for. So I'm here to disrupt that. And my goal is to target the parents I like the warrior mom. If you give me a warrior mom, I basically am building momentum in a community, right? And it's basically I'm giving answers, solutions, and we're getting kids better, and we're breaking the status quo of what ASD really is.
If you don't mind, just start with telling us about your educational journey and just take us up until now with your...
Absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Dr. Kyle Daigle. I actually, and basically from as probably as earlier as that I can basically remember wanting to be something, I was going to be a doctor. And I actually started out as a fascination in oncology. I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist. Went and played college baseball, ended up, getting hurt, decided that that was probably not the best thing for me. And I took a crazy competitive academic career. I can't stand to lose. I don't like to be second. So I went really heavily into a biological science degree. Went to Louisiana State University. Also got involved in research. I was very fortunate to work as a student research assistant at Pennington Biomedical Research Center in Baton Rouge, as well as LSU's vet school. And I had a very cool, unique research project, but I also got involved in sound waves and what sound can do to cells, in particular to oncology. And yeah, that led me into, I was studying physics at the time. I found out that you really can't treat patients with sound, which unfortunately, at the time, that was the what I wanted to do after what I got discovered. And yeah, I started studying the brain, found out that I could only be a chiropractor based in my state, treating patients with sound. And the brain's basically a bunch of circuits, and it uses brain waves, which can also be altered by sound. And yeah, so I had an incredible background initially as an alternative field. Not that I'm like, 100% holistic or against medicine at all. I'm actually integrated. But yeah, I met a really incredible guy. His name was Dr. Brandon Brock. I went to chiropractic school in Dallas, Texas, and he was lecturing a lot in there, talking about traumatic brain injuries, PANS pandas, neuroimmunology, the vagus nerve. And yeah, I had a very extensive, I went to I went to seminars every weekend when I was in chiropractic school for postgraduate education. So I was learning very high level back in 2007. And yeah, graduated chiropractic school 2011. Immediately after that, I enlisted in this neurology program, started studying functional neurology enough to where I was very fortunate to meet Dr. Robert Melillo out of New York, who published a book called Disconnected Kids, was heavily involved in primitive reflexes. And yeah, I become a lecturer with him. I taught for about 5 years in his method, went all over the world, and I got a fellowship in childhood development. And now I do keynote speech all over the entire globe on ASD, neurological rehab, and you name it, anything from A to Z with neuro based. So that's kind of a bit of my academic career.
Yeah, nicely done. Robert Melillo is fantastic. He was a previous guest, and he's. I thought some of your work kind of was similar, so that's good news because I think this is offers better solutions, or at least maybe more complete. It's not neglecting things that are optimal. So, can you just let's just get in with cracking the autism code, if you don't mind? Just especially with these left and right brain and the primitive reflexes, if we want to start there.
Yeah, well, I think it's, since you had Melillo on the thing, and then I definitely can give kind of a deeper extension into that work, right? So the human brain as a child, basically when it comes out, the brain itself, if you look at a little child, everything matters regardless of what a pediatrician tells you, right? Babies aren't lazy. Babies, basically, colic is a problem. A baby having a hard time latching onto a breast to bottle feed, a baby spitting up is basically a sign that something's not right neurologically. Right. And then also, too, that I think a huge issue in this world of the whole left to right side of the brain and primitive reflexes is the fact that pediatricians don't actually assess primitive reflexes. So when a baby comes out, every input from all of your senses, right? Sight, smell, taste, tongue, inner ear, how you hear, how much you move, how much you're rocked, how much you're stimulated, all of those things build the brain. And every sense strengthens a wire. And a lot of times, the way that a child's brain develops is that the first 2 years of a child's life, the right hemisphere predominantly is your sensory seeking part of the brain. And if children basically maybe have inner ear infections, or maybe they've been on recurrent antibiotic usage, or they had forceps applied to their head, or maybe they were breech babies, or they came out of a C-section, all of those things are abnormalities to basically a normal, healthy vaginal delivery birth, right? And we don't take any of that in consideration, right? It's now kind of like a one size fit all, right? We have emergency C-sections, elective C-sections. And immediately after that, parents are, if a child's put in a NICU, they're given a, formula fed bottle, right? And a plastic bottle, right? Back in the day, we had glass. Now we have something called BPA. So, it's interesting that from the day a child's born in 2005, the World Health Organization did a study on umbilical cord blood, and they found 287 toxins in umbilical cord blood. And that study wasn't repeated. And the right side of the brain, again, the first 2 years of life, is its job is also, it deals with allergies, inflammation. It also produces all of your immunoglobulins, which are basically these little things that basically also protect your immune system and barriers, and how the body naturally detoxifies. And the blood-brain barrier, which is a barrier that protects anything from getting in, typically does not close till after the age of 2. Right? So anything in the first 2 years of a child's life, the amount of input in through the senses, the amount of movement that a child does, anything that's put into the mouth, anything the child breathes, all of that basically matters. And inflammation hits the weakest link in the brain. So the right side of the brain's job is that it deals with your sensory seeking, it deals with your gross motor, it deals with how your body deals with allergies and inflammation and how you detoxify. And in the left hemisphere, what it does is it basically is very routine, very linear, numbers, letters, fine motor, how your immune system's activated. And it also deals with anger and agitation and fixations, right? And so if we don't get this proper input from the senses, and we don't get proper movement, and we get inflammation, or we get infections, or have adverse reactions to whatever that may be, that actually is a problem. And I don't think that pediatricians understand neurology, and people think we only know 10% about the brain. So when you have a child with a developmental delay, no one really knows an answer, right?
I want to go back to the umbilical cord blood first, but then I want to expand on this from something I saw on your Facebook. But the umbilical cord blood, that's an interesting statistic. I had a surgeon on who's doing umbilical cord brain or stem cell injections, and it's he claims that it helped his son, and he claims that it's helping autistics, and it's not well known with autism, but I think there's a little bit about that. I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can explain about this, right? I'm a heavily in fan. I'm very connected worldwide to all these doctors, and unfortunately, United States, we're a little bit behind when it comes to regulations and approvals and all that stuff. But I have families from 73 countries from all over the world, and yeah, I mean, I love stem cells, I love exosomes, I love peptides. There's basically now stem cells that you can get derived from the placenta. You can get them from the umbilical cord. And, different stem cells do different things. I mean, I work with a company from Taipei, Taiwan. I've worked with the Chinese companies. Yeah. So, I mean, stem cells, in my opinion, I think that they're going to be a huge hit in the ASD world. My personal opinion is I think that exosomes, which are a derivative of stem cells, are going to be a little bit probably the best choice initially, because exosomes are smaller, there's no DNA tissue in there, and they actually regulate inflammatory markers. And I think that when you look at ASD, from what I look at it from like a holistic standpoint, I run every lab on every child, that you actually see that ASD's most of the time really not truly ASD. It's oftentimes basically a neuroinflammatory issue. Most of the time it's pandas. Basically, it's an infection no one knows about, or potentially also some strep, or maybe it's basically some heavy metals, some detoxification, some genetic issues, some gut-brain connections, some sinus-brain connection issues, right? And so when you really start looking under the hood or in the attic, you start seeing that there's a lot of inflammation, and we need to start looking at ways to lower that inflammation, and then also how to regenerate those areas that these little infections, I call them rats, basically are going in there and they're actually eating up the outer covering of the wires. They're called tubulins, right? And when we're seeing a lot of stuff with these little connections in the brain, because I run labs for the brain, man. And I'll tell you this, in this, I got thick skin, and I'm very vocal, and I don't really care what people think about me, because at the end of the day, it's a parent who has a child who wants function and they want their kid to get better, right? And I'm the guy that's going to stand up there against anyone else and basically tell you that, look, there is something beyond ASD, right? It's basically a label, a behavior, a collection of symptoms, what's underneath it, right? And my job here is to give people answers, and I can tell you, 73 countries of kids with literally thousands of kids that there's actually answers and there's solutions, right? But first of all, you got to know exactly why. And most people don't know why and what's going on.
So something that I learned from your stuff is the Orchatoxin A. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So Orchatoxin A, it's actually a fungus. It's a white mold, and that white mold is basically present in every rice, organic, non-organic. It's in rice, it's in breads, it's in crackers, it's in pastas, it's on potatoes, and it's actually an environmental, basically trigger or pollutant that actually gets really absorbed in the food from the harvesting process, right? So you take wheat, for example. Gluten's a huge thing in the ASD world. And you take a wheat, basically a grain, right, in the field, and then the farmer basically puts it into a bin. And inside that bin, they're waiting on market prices to fluctuate. And then the 18-wheeler comes by, they take all the wheat out of the bin, or rice or corn or whatever it is, any grain, gluten-free, non-gluten-free, and they throw it into basically an 18-wheeler. It goes basically to a factory and they heat it up, they clean it up, they pasteurize it, and they produce whatever it is. Well, there's no one in there basically sanitizing the bin or taking a UV light wand and wanding down the bin, right? So what happens is these foods start collecting basically fungus inside of it because of the humidity, right? And mold likes, or even fungus likes, high humidity. So you take a loaf of bread, you basically leave it in the bag, you put it in your pantry, 2-3 months later, you open it up and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of mold in this thing, right? How did it get in there? It's never been open, right? Because it's contaminated in the food. So what's happening with this thing is that this Orchatoxin A is also heavily even found in water damaged homes. It's found in HVAC systems. It's found in carpet when you go to a hotel room, or rugs in a house. It's found in the food source. So what's happening is you breathe it in through your nose, and you also ingest it when you're eating all these excessive carbohydrate foods, right? And what Orchatoxin A does, which is an aspergillus mold, it selectively finds 3 areas in the brain that it likes to target. And what happens with infections inside of the body is they're very similar to like when a deer walks through the woods. A deer basically runs the same exact lane. We call it a track, right? Unless it's like spooked, and then it'll kind of divert around. But when it feels safe, it's going to keep running the same lane. They hit 3 areas. One, it's an area, we call it the basal ganglia. It's the go and the stop button in the brain. How we fixate, how we inhibit, right? Stimming, right? Our deer in the headlights. It's called a dopamine 1, initiate go, dopamine 2, how you stop, right? Then they'd actually hit something called the striatum, which is called the midbrain, which is where your pupils are. This is what makes your eyes fixate, focus. How many ASD kids can't literally look you in the eyes, right? And they got really big pupils. When they walk, they actually don't symmetrically swing their arms. It's called the rubrospinal tract. It's a pathway that comes down. And it also hits something called the hippocampus, which is your cognition, your memory, right? Some of these kids literally have some of the most incredible memories. They can memorize literally numbers and letters and literally recite movies or speak 50 different languages, right? But they can't comprehend certain things, right? So comprehension, when inflammation gets in, it can basically turn the knob up, make it hyperactive, or it can turn it down and it can basically weaken it. So it's very interesting.
Is this the core? Is this the very upstream of the excitation inhibition imbalance, you think?
Yeah. So what happens with the excitation, right? So excitation is basically due to something called glutamate. Glutamate is a neurotransmitter that excites the brain. And when you look up the way the brain works, there's this thing that's called the basal ganglia, right? It's the go, the stop button. And glutamate from something called the thalamus, which is the relay station kind of in the brain. Any thought, any movement, any agitation, even the immune system, how it has to decipher this infection, everything goes through this little thing called the thalamus, and then it fires glutamate and it goes to the brain, and the brain sends it basically to this thing called the basal ganglia, and the brain has to say, safe, not safe, go, don't go. For some of the people that kind of like to chirp in a little bit, there's also something called the limbic system, which is the amygdala. I always have these people that listen to these that want to make comments, so I'm just going to throw a little shout out to them that I know my neurology. But what happens is the inflammation gets in and it basically blocks these little receptors. And that basically can make a kid literally like get overwhelmed and start flapping his hands. Or sometimes you have a parent who goes to the doctor's office and the kid's like he's like pride. He can't get out of the chair. He's like so like a deer in the headlights. And all that response is basically it's a stress response. We look at it as a behavior response, but it's just basically how the brains basically calibrate and go and don't go.
So a good way of looking at autism is like this EI imbalance, and these toxins, and even it seems like there's maybe some toxicity from the maternal or even beginning at neurolation. Is this all this time frame? That's a region of interest.
It's a combination of everything, man. I mean, you can get it right. So what I don't think, right, if I was basically in a perfect world and I was able to control healthcare, right, I would say that mom and dad, every parent, basically, we're going to do a DNA swab, right? We're going to do a DNA swab to see if mom and dad basically have methylation issues, MTHFR, something called COMT, which is how your body breaks down cortisol genetically. Right. And then if mom or dad has it, then if either one of them have it or both of them have it, then I'm going to be a little bit cautious. And right. Then if mom wants to take a prenatal vitamin, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You can't take a synthetic version of folate. Right. We're going to put you on a methylated B vitamin because that B vitamin is so crucial. That's the answer to the whole leucovorin and cerebral folate deficiency issues. Right. And I'm going to make sure that mom's properly taking proper nutrients when she's pregnant. And then if baby comes out, I'm going to do a swab day 1 genetically to see if the baby can detoxify. And then maybe I might even put that baby on a delayed vaccine schedule, right? If that baby basically has like methylation issues. And then also too, is I'm going to actually want to make sure that baby can, latch on. And anyways, there's a lot of things, right? But yeah, I think what ASD world people don't realize is why it's not a one size fit all, right? I mean, I see kids from literally every corner of the globe. I mean, even islands like the Maldives and Fiji or Sri Lanka, right? I see them from all over. And it's interesting that I've never seen, and I've been in practice 14 and a half years, I've never seen the same ASD kid. Never have. Never have, right? And I think that's why they call it a spectrum disorder. But really, the interesting thing is some kids can talk, some kids can't, some kids STEM, some kids don't. Some are higher functioning, some have learning disabilities, some kids STEM like crazy. Some kids, you can't even tell they even have ASD, just have social skills. And that's a problem, right? Because then how do you treat ASD if you don't really know exactly what it is, but then no one can even explain what it is?
Yeah, it's a moving target.
And look, man, this is why I've always enjoyed doing these podcasts, right? And it's not to impress people for my knowledge at all. It's just to make people think, right? Because there's a parent out there that I know that I'm going to, basically resonate with, and I'm here to support you in any way possible. But the goal here is that we got to basically start making a change, man. If we don't, then these kids basically might not never find their voice, right? And that's why I made that book, Cracking the Code and Finding Their Voice. And really, it's just that I'm looking for those parents to educate you. And I use my social media to do that, right? Because I'm going to tell you that, the brain is plastic. Dr. Melillo is an incredible, smart guy, an amazing guy. Spent years basically trying to promote and prove what he found. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't even know that his work even exists, And I worked alongside with him for 5 years, man. This guy's a trooper. I mean, even at his age, we were flying around like crazy and like not sleeping and working like crazy. And at the end of the day, we weren't doing this for us. We were doing this for parents, right? But we also are parents. We have kids and we know what it's like. We know how much we love our kids, and we would literally sell our kidney for our kids. And we want to be able to help that parent out there who's, this. I just today had a family from California. I said I went to mom, and she's in my office and she's crying because she spent 17 years trying to find someone like me. And it's so unfortunate. And she just told me, her husband told me, said, she actually found you at 2:00 in the morning. And she literally found you on Instagram, and she literally wakes me up and she's like, this is a doctor we have to go see. Right.
Okay.
We can go all day long, brother.
I want to go back to these toxins and ask: Is it the modern human in our environments? We don't have the proper antioxidants, things like melanin, because you mentioned the cortisol and things, and we're talking about the midbrain, and you mentioned the dopamine. Melanin and dopamine are like this. Is it a lack of antioxidants from our modern environments and avoiding the sunlight, or is it just this influx of like the Orchatoxin A and all of this mold and crap?
Okay, so let's go this, right? Go back to, this is for the people that basically say that we got better diagnostic skills, right? Okay, let's go. Let's talk to that demographic, right? So back in the day, I remember whenever I wanted to get online and I had AO Instant Messenger, right? It took me 5 minutes. I was actually growing up on a cattle ranch, by the way. So I'm actually a cowboy. And it took me 5 minutes to basically literally dial up the internet. I only knew at that time, only knew one kid with ASD. Okay. And the interesting thing is that back in the day, right, we actually had horrible TV, right? We didn't have the high definition televisions, nor did we have 5G internet. And also, too, is that I remember that we used to go to the park on the weekends, and I remember that we used to play outside. And we didn't have cell phones, right? My mom actually had the little bitty box fan, the little box phone literally in the car, right? That was the mobile phone, right? One ASD kid that I can remember. And I traveled actually as a child. I traveled all over the United States because of my family's job. And basically, I played baseball all over the country, basically. Anyways, but so there's a guy, right? Albert Einstein came with an equation: E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light, right? But I don't think people really understand what that really means. Energy equals mass of every cell, every neuron, every atom, every muscle, every organ times the diversity of color of light: red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, green, violet squared. Okay. Back in the day, we spent most of the time outside, right? Even at school, we had playground time, right? We were outside for like recess for like an hour.
Open windows.
Open windows, man, and not freaking crazy blue LED lights, right? So in today's society, what happens is due to the best parenting device or best babysitter, cheapest babysitter is a cell phone or a tablet, right? And the human brain, by the way, the American Academy of Pediatrics actually literally, if you Google about like what they advise for screen time, they don't actually advise screen time before the age of 2. And what comes off of that screen is basically a blue wavelength. And what happens is that the brain was not designed to basically get this much sensory stimulation, right? We had moguls for little kids back in the day, and like horrible kind of like little colors, right? Or mostly like red, yellow, green, blue, right? And we had these little things that spun around, right? Well, today now we have all this high tech Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, the 4K, 8K, 5G internet, all these things. And I think that we have to look at ASD potentially now as maybe a environmental problem, right? Because way back in the day, even to go back and look up, even the Egyptian times, you never seen people walking around with their fingers in their ears like this, right? So what was the change, right? Yeah, and again, I'm just here to just bring light and help make people think a little bit differently. I might be wrong. I doubt I am, but I could be. But I think that when you start to stress the brain out, the brain is not going to function as well, right? And so when you're stressed out, right? Your brain's stressed out. People get constipated when they're stressed, right? What does that mean? You're harboring your toxins. Like stool is a way you detoxify, right? So if I can excrete all these toxins, I breathe stuff in, I basically eat toxic food. I mean, all you got to do is just look at the back of ingredients on a food or even what these kids eat, and you can't even pronounce half the words. And then you Google it and you're like, that's a carcinogen, which means that causes cancer or it causes hyperactivity. But then I'm going to feed it to my little child who brain has never been properly developed and they can't even detoxify. So what do you think it does? It recirculates. Anything in the gut goes straight to the brain, right? You get a headache, you take a pill, it goes from the gut straight to the brain. You smell something, right? It goes straight to the brain, right? What if those barriers get breached? Now, literally, the brain's literally like fighting Mike Tyson with literally no arms.
It kind of follows the beginning since Canner and Asperger's too, like the amount of modern environmental harms.
Yeah, man. Look, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm a child, man. I'm one of these kids that basically got diagnosed with ADHD and got put on methamphetamines prescribed for 18 years, man. Look, you should see all my books. I memorized every one of these things. You grab every one of my books, by the way. I mean, I can show up. I goes all the way up, even higher, right? And I even got so many books that they're in the shelves, right? I love to, I'm so fixated on reading that I have an addiction that's like crazy. My wife drives, I ride in the passenger seat, and I read books, research papers nonstop. I can't stop, right? 18 years of being pumped, go, 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 and no inhibition.
Yeah.
Right. And no one ran any freaking labs on me. Just take a drug and just hope for the best. And then 18 years later, guess what? I am still one of the most hyperactive people on the planet, but I figured out how to channel it. And it was neurology, right? It's very linear. Mm-hmm. And it's got all these spokes. So, at least I can give them credit for basically making you hyper intelligent, but still, self-regulation was something very, very hard for me. And thankfully, Dr. Robert Malilo changed my life because he literally tested me one time as a student and was like, oh my gosh, dude, you're a mess. I'm like, yeah. 18 years old methamphetamines, man. I'm like sweating like crazy. My hands are wet. I literally can't sleep at night. I had to take medications to go to sleep. And he told me, he said, hey, look, you have no right frontal lobe. I'm like, I know, but I clearly know that I can't self-regulate myself. And so he literally had me do all the primitive reflexes and the right brain stimulation. And guess what happened? I started sleeping through the night, which was wild.
Yeah, that's underrated. Yeah. Everybody with autism has a circadian rhythm, or I shouldn't say circadian rhythm. Well, I should, but they have sleep-wake dysfunction. But I think my interpretation of circadian rhythm is not sleep-wake cycles. It's your body's 24-hour physiology and metabolic rhythms. It's not sleep-wake.
Yeah. But it goes back to this. What programs it is basically, we were naturally designed to wake up at sunrise and after sundown. The only light you should have seen primitively, evolutionary, was literally from a fire or a candle.
Mm-hmm. Very low lux and all red light.
Yeah, anything above 150 lux creates basically stress, right? So you literally start watching look at your cell phone or you look at a TV or turn on a light, right? After the sun goes down, you're already stressing the brain. Look how many people need insomnia. How many people have insomnia, man? It's insane. It's unheard of, right? I'll tell you something very interesting. Just Google the circadian rhythm biolab, right? It's out of Harvard. And see what they do with the insects. Insects that basically live outdoors live 120 days natural life expectancy. Ones that live indoors basically die at 90 days and have neurodegeneration. That's wild, man.
Neurodegeneration is definitely involved in this indoor environment and these isolated, shorter wavelengths of light.
Yeah. Look, it's physics, right? For those people from the science perspective, it's physics, right? But and it's neurology. And the thing is that kind of like the elephant in the room, right? The science is actually there. It's just that most people haven't put all these things together. And at the end of the day, even though it's all this fancy science stuff, life's really made to be simple, right? Look at a kid, How much sunlight does that kid get? Very little, right? Because the kid basically has to wake up, he looks at a tablet, mom turns on the light, he eats inside, he gets put into the car, he's given a tablet, he goes to school, he's on a tablet, he gets out of school, he gets back in the car, he's given a tablet, he goes to PT, he goes to OT, he goes to ABA therapy, maybe goes to see a psychologist, maybe a chiropractor if they do something like that, maybe a functional medicine doctor, and then he goes home. And does that 5 days a week. And in the weekend, the kid basically literally stays inside and watches TV and YouTube and playing on his cell phone. And he does that Saturday, Sunday. And then on Monday, repeats it all over again. And then you run a blood panel and the kid's got low vitamin D, right? He's got inflammation issues. He's got detoxification issues. He's got hyperactivity, right? And it's like, okay, let's stop, think about what we need to do to change our daily routine, right? To start rebuilding the brain, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, it was built one stone at a time. So we're just going to start making small incremental changes. And guess what happens? You start seeing behavior change too.
Yeah. So I want to go with how to rescue that basal ganglia and the midbrain. What are some treatments for that? And then I also want to talk about photobiomodulation.
Okay. All right. So basal ganglia. So what we normally do is there's kind of two things, right? You can run labs as a parent. You can run, there's something called a Cunningham panel, and that might tell you that your kid has pandas or pans, right? It's just basically a label, but at least you have another answer. And then what happens is that you have to look at these kids' pupils, right? So the bigger the pupil, the weaker the connection to the brain. So most kids with ASD typically predominantly have a very large right pupil. Okay. And what happens with the pupil is the bigger the purpose of the pupil is that when the brain's under stress, it's going to dilate the pupil so it can see a threat in the environment, right? And what's interesting about the right pupil is that the right pupil has literally a wire that basically it shoots down and it goes to your proximal flexors, like your left shoulder and your left hip. And it's designed that way as a defense mechanism. So I'm walking through the woods, someone tries to come to the right side, my brain, if I push them my right hand or kick them my right leg, I'm not going to be able to defend myself as good because they're not going to go very far, right? So this little wire goes to my left shoulder, my left hip. So if I turn across the body, I can literally make them fly, right? So when you watch these kids with ASD walk, watch what happens is they don't swing their left arm. Okay. They typically swing their right arm, right? So if this right eye, right, because these kids stim or they have impulsivity or behavior issues or they can't self-regulate, right? This right pupil, what it does is it shoots directly up into the right frontal lobe and it's supposed to basically push a brake pedal, right? But if this pupil is really large, it means it's weak too. So it's not going to work. So we can go in and start doing sensory stimulation to the left shoulder or to the left hip to basically activate this area. It's called the midbrain, and it fires straight to the brain. Kind of give it a little nudge, right? Or we can turn around and we can do pupillary constriction, where if I want to make the right pupil fire to the brain, I can shine a light really weird in the corner of the left eye. And when you do that, there are these little wires that actually go from outside the left eye and actually inside the right eye. They go straight to this little part right here. It's called the midbrain. It fires right up to the brake pedal. Or I can use sound like a metronome in the left ear, like a rhythmic movement, something slow, rhythmic. And I can use sound to fire from the ear, go straight to the midbrain component. And those who want to get fancy, the vestibular system too, and then fire up to the brake pedal and push a brake, right? So I can basically literally go in and I can activate basically this little D2 receptor in the brain to push the brake pedal in the basal ganglia by hitting wires underneath. That's the beauty of functional neurology, right? Is understanding neurological pathways, the wires that go to certain areas. So that's that thing. Then you can go into the regenerative medicine world where people are putting nasal sprays and peptides and exosomes and stem cells in the right nostril to go into this side of the brain. And then there's also something that you can do is called cerebellar exercises, like coordinated movements. So the cerebellum is this little bitty thing that basically it releases this chemical called GABA, which is this neurotransmitter, brain chemical that calms things down. It chills it out. It's actually used in the basal ganglia to basically inhibit things. and you can do like figure eights with the left arm or the left leg, and then boom. So those are some really cool little mechanisms that I gave you as little wires that you as a parent can push the buttons to try to hit the self-regulation to reduce stimming in the brain. But underneath, by the way, there's an infection that is basically causing an inflammation. And typically those infections are Orchatoxin A, Aspergillus mold, Clostridium, and even Strep A.
Okay. A lot of connections to the gut, like gut dysbiosis.
Yep. And also the nose, right? Nasal dysbiosis, nose, brain, nose, gut, brain. That's a missing link in all these families that spend so much money in stool samples, and they do the diet modifications that take glutamine and slippery elm and fish oil, and they do a post-stool sample 4-6 months later, and it's still inflamed. Kind of like if I lacerate my hand or my arm, right? I keep rubbing it, right? It'll never heal, even though I could put ointment on it. Because if I get stuff from the sinuses that keeps repopulating into the gut will never heal.
Breathing is connected to the nervous system for sure, and it's
you need symmetrical facial tone to breathe through your nose. You know how many of these kids have asymmetrical facial tone? All you got to do is look at a kid on the spectrum, and you can tell that they're basically not a typical child. You can just look at the face, right? Facial tone is a direct reflection of the brain. Yeah. But look, the thing is that you need your face to be symmetrical to sniff, right? Your facial tone is what's going to allow you to sniff, right? And then your face also innervates, very interesting, the trigeminal nerve innervates the front 2/3 of your tongue for taste, right? How many of these kids are picky eaters? Afrid.
You don't hear about this stuff.
Dude, I'm giving you some ammo here.
Yeah, well, not me. Hopefully some warrior moms.
Yeah, they're gonna find it, right? They're praying, asking for answers and solutions, and they're about to hear it.
Yeah. So how about the photobiomodulation? And I want to really start this by saying that it's a bit of a misnomer that we call this red light therapy. It's not therapy. Red light is not therapy. It's something that we evolved under. Yeah. Now humans take it away, and then we're going to bring it back as therapy. It's not therapy.
I call it I joke around my staff. I have a really good friend of mine, by the way. I'm going to give her a shout out for this. Her name is Sitara. She's out of Nevada, and she told me, she said, "Kyle, you know what you really do?" She works with ASD kids too, by the way. She's amazing, and she goes, "You do synthetic nature," and I was like, that is by far the best word for what I do is really a synthetic nature, right? And you're going to like that, right? Synthetic nature. And okay, so let's go about photobiomodulation, right? Let's break it down. So the big fancy word basically means photo means light, bio means life, modulation means change. Light changes life, right? What does the sun do? It makes, take this right. An animal never needs a veterinarian until it becomes domesticated. Okay? So you take a plant, lives outside, put it inside, don't put any light on it. What does a plant do? It dies.
It dies.
Right? Light gives life.
Mm-hmm.
Specific light, right? Full spectrum light. Okay, so photobiomodulation. Different color variances. Red, basically just think about like waking up watching the sun rise too, right? It's beautiful to watch the sunrise and sunset. It's that kind of like reddish, kind of orangish glow. But red really activates, really can enhance energy production. You also, on your arteries, your veins, your skin, your scalp, you have something called a chromophore, a light receptor, right? This is how vitamin D is produced, right? From the sun, basically hits the skin, goes to the liver, produce vitamin D. It's a neurohormone, helps the immune system, metabolism, and all that. But anyways, so what happens with light is that, specifically red, is that it really just enhances blood flow, and it also acts as an anti-inflammatory, right? Think about when you're outside in the sun, and if it's really a hot day, right, you also start sweating, right? And sweating is a form of detoxification. Okay, so you have infrared. Infrared is a deeper penetrating, wavelength, right? There's infrared saunas, right? Infrared saunas, you're going to sweat quite a bit. Infrared can basically penetrate pretty deep. So there's some skepticalism inside of, the whole photobiomodulation world. You have the anti people that, think that all this stuff is wild, although they just don't know physics. But what happens is that light, especially infrared, they supposedly say that it can penetrate to the bone, right? And or even maybe even through the bone. And I'm not going to argue with any of those people, but basically what happens is that if you want to penetrate deep down into like an organ or a muscle or a nerve or maybe even the brain, infrared works a little better. I lecture all the time in front of doctors, so I love the arrogance and the I love to ask rhetorical questions because they really don't know when you really question them in front of people. I like to make them sit down a little bit and never ask a question like that again. But what happens is that the carotid arteries right here, these supply blood flow to the front 2/3 of the brain. That's where most of all your executive function and everything is, right? And then we have this little thing called the vertebral artery in the back of the neck that supplies the brain stem, which is where all of our senses are, excluding smell, and basically where all of our primitive reflexes are, as Dr. Melillo talked to you guys about. And it supplies to the back 1/3 of the brain, right? It's basically the neck. This is a crucial area to do photobiomodulation or even having sunlight too, because this is going to give blood flow to the brain, right? Better blood flow, better function. So if you can get better blood flow, better function, then also an anti-inflammatory process, which these things actually do, you start dampening inflammation in the brain. That's really truly all ASD really is in the first place, is basically it's an inflamed brain with abnormal circuits, abnormal brainwave activity, and then nutrient deficiencies and detoxification issues, right? So, so there's different colors. So red, infrared. There's also ultraviolet light. Ultraviolet light, think of these things as when you go outside, what happens when you get a sunburn, right? People think you're going to put all this sunscreen on you that causes skin cancer. But what happens is ultraviolet light, what it does is it actually kills infections. So for the people out there wondering, right, when we're in microbiology class in undergrad and you're learning about viruses and all these other infections, after we work with these pathogens, we actually use a UV light to sanitize our desks so we don't contaminate it, right? So ultraviolet light, imagine if you get to the sinuses, to the throat and to the stomach or to any area that has an infection, its natural thing, according to physics, is that it reduces infections, right? Or you just go sit outside in the sun. I joke around, I tell people like, you came out butt naked, right? You didn't have any Chanel clothes or any Hanes or any of those type of things. You come out butt naked, right? So the sun basically literally produces life, right? Back in the day, way back biblically time, people want to get that speaking, right? People use literally like a leaf to cover up, right?
Yeah,
Leaves are green. Leaves basically absorb light and they produce, chlorophyll, and it can penetrate below it and give you some pretty good nutrients. And then there's green light. And green light is very parasympathetic driven, which is the resting relaxation part of your nervous system. And they did some really cool studies and basically now have a theory, but found that the gastrointestinal, even the microbes in the gut, also function off of light. And you got to think about this too, for people that are wondering, right? When you get sick, do you have a lot of energy? No, right? Well, you're losing basically light, right? Go outside in the sun, get light. E equals MC squared. Sunlight to the body produces energy.
Yeah, I think people don't understand how we have certain parts of our biology that absorb certain wavelengths of light. And now it's just all isolated. UV light is very important for things like hormones and protein synthesis, especially the aromatic ones.
Absolutely, man. Look, I just think it's this right here. It's just that we've been distracted, right?
Yeah. Don't look here. Look here. These are your treatments. If you have a kid with autism, here's what you can have. These are your treatment options. And it's like, it's not working. It's not working. How often, and take me through a little intervention with the photobiomodulation. Like how fast do you typically see improvement, and how often would somebody do that?
Okay. So I like to at least do about 3 to 5 minutes of photobiomodulation over the main arterial supply to the brain. I'm very big in doing photobiomodulation to the whole entire stomach, to the digestive system, to the liver, even in the backside to the kidneys, and then also even a little bit to the face. So right, what happens is all photobiomodulation is doing is it's basically improving blood flow and it's dampening inflammation. I I think that it's kind of still hard for some of those people that may be skeptical inside of this thing because people expect instantaneously results, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it didn't work, then I don't see a change. I'm not going to use it, right? They don't realize how much inflammation is underneath. So if I was just doing photobiomodulation itself, I would say that, giving it maybe a max like a week or even 2 weeks of doing this thing either on a daily basis or a couple of times a week to actually start to see benefits. However, in our line of work, if you basically wire and fire networks and you work on things like the primitive reflexes and the senses simultaneously, while using photobiomodulation, then you can actually see a lot faster results. So, I'll give you an example. I do something called intensive rehab, which is where I do 16 to 20 hours basically of rehab on a child on a weekly basis. 2 hours in the morning, break for an hour to 2 hours in the evening, back to back. And we had a kid this week that was he was 5 and he was nonverbal. And Wednesday he said "mom" for the first time. So I mean that's pretty good. I had a 17-year-old kid that was nonverbal. That we also got this little kid by Thursday, so it took us 4 days, and he was actually able to actually say one of my assistants' name, Seth. So I mean, we can get really cool results, right? But and I mentioned this. Someone saying, "Well, you're just putting lasers and stimulating." Is like, no, 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 no. Like we ran labs before they came in. We put them on a diet. We put them on detoxification. We started getting rid of the mold. We had nutrient support. We did all that to front load them to lower their inflammation. So when they show up to come see me, it's basically time to party, right? We're wiring and rebuilding basically a house.
Okay, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
I'll give you one here, right? So I'll give you an analogy. My staff loves this. I call it the rat in the attic, right? Rat in the attic is basically most homes in America, right? We have all of our wiring in the attic, right? And you walk up in the attic because the light's flickering. So you go up there and you see that the wires are messed up. So you call the electrician, and the electrician basically cleans up the wire, repairs it up. And then literally about 6 weeks later, the light starts flickering again, right? So you go up in the attic and you're like, what in the world? Why is the wires getting eaten up? Right. And then you see some little rat kind of pebblets on the ground. You're like, that's weird. I got a rat in my attic, right? You don't see it, you don't hear it, but all it's doing is eating up the wires. But then all you see is the light flickering, right? And those little rats are basically infections or there's inflammations, they're environmental pollutants, and they can travel in entry through the sinuses, which is basically an air filter. They can get in the mouth and they can go through cavities in these little kids and go to the brainstem, to the brain, or to the gut, right? Or these little rats can get in the gut and basically travel up the vagus nerve and then make its way into the brain, right? You see the behavior, the lights flicker, right? But you don't know why. And you try to go and do the ABA therapy and the PT and the OT and the breathing exercises and whatever else, maybe the essential oil from whatever company that's the MLM company. And then all of a sudden what happens is that you get a little improvement, you get really excited, but then it wears off because you never got rid of the rat, right? Because the rat's going to go in there and it's going to eat up the wires.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to have a message about or talk about?
I'd say this that in this world, this is for the parents, right? Is that before you select any therapy, before you go and spend crazy amounts of money on anything, like you need to sit down with the doctor, the therapist, and you literally just need to literally just take a notebook and literally just ask as many questions as to why, right? Why is this going on? Why is this happening? What's underneath? What are you doing to monitor my child if I seek your care? Is there any diagnostics that you do to mark progress? What does the expectation look like? What about the labs, right? And when you get to the point when the doctor can't give you any answers, and it's basically that's just how it is, or I don't know, or you realize they can't give you look you dead in the eye, right? Make a direct eye contact with you, and they can't basically look you dead in the eye. That person probably is going to get you to a point where you're going to plateau, right? And I've been doing this 14 and a half years. I joke around and tell people I don't have hair because of my job is very intense because, I have the dad that's wanting to stab me or choke me initially. And then I have the mom just perseverating because she can't sleep and she just wants her kid to speak. Right. And there's a huge family dynamic. I've seen divorces and all kinds of stuff happen in my career. And, my goal for you as a parent is just, what's best. That there's something going on and 100% trust your intuition. And if you go to a doctor and they tell you that there's nothing that there can be done, right? Just know that you can always change the story, right? Other doctors, other therapists have different books. They have bigger books. They have more chapters. They have more experience, and they might give you a different story, right? And at the end of the day, you are your child's best advocate, and just be a savage, a warrior, and never, ever, ever, ever accept no. That's my mom. My brother was actually immunized, and unfortunately, he ended up getting basically bacterial meningitis and spent 6 weeks in an ice bath. His head swole up. I watched my parents, basically, the doctors telling me he's probably going to be a little vegetable, even if he makes it. And then I watched my mom take my brother all over to get him better. I watched my mom crying. I watched my mom asking doctors to help to look deeper, trying to kick her out of an office. And you know what? That right there is why I'm like I am today. And that right there is my demographic of parents, right? You want answers, you want solutions. I've already been there from a personal experience. And what's amazing is my brother is my nurse practitioner, and he is an animal and he's on fire, but he knows what it's like on the other side because he went the other way and I went the alternative way. And guess what happened? We met in the middle because there's a time and a place for us all, right? So I say all that, and again, there's nothing scripted about this. This is just us rolling, right? But just to the parent out there, just never give up.
Yeah, okay. That's a great way to end, I think. I had one other question, but I think I will just pass. Can you tell us how to find you, especially like the social media information? Because there's a lot of good teachings there. And if people can see you remotely or in person?
Yeah. So I have quite a few ways to basically get to me. So I physically practice in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So people get to me through either Houston or New Orleans or Baton Rouge or Lafayette, or even flying into Lake Charles. I also practice in Dubai. I do split my time basically back and forth between the UAE and Lake Charles, Louisiana. I have another location in Atlanta, Georgia with Dr. Ryan Cedarmark. So my organization is called Neurosolution. So my private practice, if you go to www.neurosolutionlc.com, that's me and my private practice in Lake Charles. In the Middle East, for those international, I also have neurosolution.ae. My clinic in Atlanta, Georgia is neurosolutionatl.com. I also have an AI software program that I partnered up with basically a former college, and I built out the whole A to Z for practitioners, caregivers, K through 12, and doctors. That thing is called neurosagehub.com. I also make video games for kids with ASD that basically are very unique to try to enhance the brain. And we built the whole educational model with diet modifications and therapy and red light therapy and products and all those things. And again, I have a book. I have 2 books, Finding Their Voice and Cracking the Code of Autism. They can be found on Amazon. And I have a YouTube channel, just Dr. Kyle Daigle, Instagram at Dr. Kyle Daigle, a Facebook page, Dr. Kyle Daigle. And yeah, if you want to get to me personally, calling out my clinic, +1 337 499 3162. And yeah, it's very interesting. Even people that actually reach out to me on social media, people can actually direct message me on Instagram. I personally still manage this. I still do it all. I don't have a marketing team. Yeah, it's me, and I'm a real person. And yeah, I had a child with seizures, so I know what it's like to be a parent. And my job is to basically serve you and serve these kids, and hopefully one day get these kids to find their voice.
Yeah, I love that. Dr. Kyle Daigle, thank you for joining.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Ryan.
All right. God bless you, man.
Yes, you as well. Look, I have a lot of energy, and again, I respect you for what you're doing. I respect you for reaching out to me. I appreciate the opportunity, and I just hope that what you're doing. Again, thank you, and God bless you for what you're doing. Right, because this calling is bigger than us. Right, it's about them. It's about serving people, and you never know. Right, you just change one life. That's one life that basically, literally, is going to flourish. So.